Hello guys, Adam Isko is here with brand new content because 3 days ago I attended my first ever early board chess tournament, so I thought to myself, why not to make a recap? Now, if you like to watch Gotham chess recaps, this is more or less going to resemble Guess the ELO episode. Because man, I suck at chess exceptionally. Maybe you didn't notice this, but I really do. Anyways, I'm willingly going to embarrass myself in front of you and my family just to provide some educational value, so you can learn from my mistakes. By the way, I'm going to be recording this on my new foldable device, so the layout is going to be a little bit different, but perhaps you don't mind. Now, let's jump into the first game. So in my first game I'm playing with the white pieces. I got paired against a young lady. She looked like she's about 16 years old and her rating was 1650 EL. I opted to go for pawn to e4. By the way, the time controls are 60 minutes and 30 seconds increment. So this made me curious, how is my dubious repertoire of opening tricks and traps gonna perform in such conditions? Alright, so she replied with pawn to e5, I went knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, so we got the Italian game on the board, and she went for the two knights defense. I was really wondering if we can get some craziness. Possibly the Neckmanson gambit would be ideal. So I played pawn to d4, but unfortunately she didn't allow me to have any fun and she played pawn to d6. Since I don't really like to play closed structures, I just captured to open up the center. She recaptured with the knight, so I grabbed the knight and she recaptured with the pawn. Now, the queens are staring at each other, and I was wondering if I can get away with move bishop captures on f7. Ultimately, I decided against it, but let me tell you, it is the best move for white here. And no, it doesn't win the queen, and that's what I was afraid of, because even though the king can capture the bishop and now we seemingly win the queen for free, it is not really for free and it is only temporary thanks to this move bishop to b4 check. And I was thinking, yeah, I would now have to block this check somehow and then she can capture using the rook, and now like she's having more activity, my e-pawn is falling and also I have doubled b-pawn, so I didn't like this. What I missed was after bishop to b4 check, I have an option to just block this check using the queen. And in this variation, well, she would capture the queen, I would recapture with the knight to keep the e-pawn protected, and now I am just up pawn and I am just much better here. Yeah, but this didn't happen. After the exchange in the center, I just took the queen, she captured with the king, so at least now she cannot get castled. And now, yes, the f-pawn is hanging, but so is my e-pawn, so I decided to just be solid and I pushed pawn to f3 to support the e4 pawn. Now, she didn't protect her f-pawn, she just went bishop to c5. I guess she didn't want to allow me to get castled, but I took the pawn and now I am up a pawn and this is like better for white. She went king to e7 to chase the bishop away and I just parked it back to c4, and now she pushed pawn to h6. So obviously she doesn't want to get pinned and perhaps she would like to push this pawn forward. I decided it is time to continue with development, so I played knight to c3 and she went for pawn to c6, not allowing my knight to jump into her territory. And here I played kind of a little bit of a passive move, pawn to a3, but the idea was I want to be able to retreat my light square bishop in the event of pawn to b5. So, guys, by the way, I am having a little bit of a technical issues with drawing the arrows, so I'll be using these stock arrows of this recording app, if you don't mind. Okay, let's continue with the game. Here she continued with the plan and she pushed pawn to g5. Here I was thinking, how to get rid of this annoying bishop of hers, because it is super annoying and I cannot get castled and it is her most active piece, and I just knew I should be trying to get rid of the bishop. I was wondering, do I march my king up so I can use the e3 square to exchange the bishops, and then I decided I would do it like this with knight to d1. I was happy to find out later that this was actually the most correct move. Anyways, here my opponent was trying to go for this g-pawn storm, but for some reason she felt like she needed to support it with the rook first, and she played rook to g8. And this is hilarious because it hangs the rook for free, but I didn't even capture it. I didn't see it. There were pieces and pawns standing on the chessboard, and I just didn't realize that this path is clear for my bishop to grab the rook. And what's even more hilarious, the rook was just standing there for the next 3 moves or so. Nobody noticed. Yeah, that was really funny. So here I just continued with my plan, and I played the bishop to e3, hoping to exchange the bishops. She didn't allow this, she just put the bishop back on d6. So I thought, okay, let's get castled, because now I can get my king castled. And here she had the last opportunity to save the rook, but she didn't. She pushed pawn to g4. And I was a little bit scared at first. I was like, am I getting under some kind of strong attack? Is my king going to get exposed or something? And luckily then my vision kicked in and I saw that I can capture the rook. So I took the rook. I saw on my opponent's face the shock of realizement of this move. Yeah, hilarious. And by the way, now she could have just grabbed the bishop and she would be down in exchange, but she threw in this g captures on f3. And I was thinking, deep inside, I knew that this just allows me to retreat the bishop all the way back, and now I am simply up a full rook. But I was scared of letting her open up my king like this, and I didn't want to allow any counterplay. By the way, here rook to f3 and white is totally fine, even using the black pawn as a shield. But I opted to not go into this variation, and I just simply took the pawn, let her capture the bishop, and this way I am only up an exchange and up a pawn, but I knew it was enough to be like winning. Okay, so here I played rook to g3, and the idea of this move was I am hitting the knight, obviously, and if she just protects the knight with the bishop, for example, then I can just go to g7 square and infiltrate with my rook. So this is actually what happened. She played bishop to e6, I played rook to g7 check, and now she can either get herself a pinned bishop, or she moves the king out of the way, and she did move the king, but now the b7 falls. And I was super happy in this position, and I thought I would easily convert this into a win. So here she played bishop to e7. She was probably trying to obscure my rook so it doesn't have a free access to the whole 7 rank. And here I just developed knight back to c3 so that my e-pawn is protected once again, and also my last rook can join the party. In this position she continued with pawn to h5. Yeah, there is like not much that black can do. It's black is pretty tied down. The knight needs to protect the bishop, the rook is protecting the pawn, and such and such. So I just went ahead and I played rook to f1 check. She went king to g7. Now her dark square bishop is pinned, and I was looking for ways how to punish this. Obviously, bishop to c5 is the strongest move, but I didn't play this. I played rook to c7, going for the pawns. Here she played bishop to c4, and this is one of those moves that you can hear your coach's voice in your head. Don't play these one-shot moves. And yeah, this is not a good move, because yes, it hits my rook, but I can just get more active with the rook lift. So I went rook to f5, and now a couple of pawns are falling here. She went for king to g6, unpinning the dark square bishop, and I captured the pawn on e5. I was hoping that she would go for this fork, which wouldn't work, thanks to that just rook captures on c6, and now both of the bishops are hanging and the bishop is repinned. But of course she didn't fall for this. Here she played pawn to c5, because obviously I was threatening to just capture the pawn with the check and then win the light square bishop. But this gives me the option to trade one rook for two minor pieces, which is of course just beneficial for me. And in this position, my opponent played this sneaky rook to f8. And if I'm not careful, I get checkmated with rook to f1, back rank checkmate. Fortunately, I have foreseen this and I just closed the f file with the bishop. Then she tried to sneak in using the d file, but my knight is covering the d1 square, so there is no back rank issues. So I just went ahead and captured the a pawn. Well, she went for rook to d2, trying to infiltrate on my second rank. And I thought to myself, it is time to just make a luft for the king. So I pushed pawn to h3. She captured the c2 pawn, and I played rook to b7, protecting the b pawn. Here, kudos to my opponent for not resigning, but trying to be creative. She went for king to g5. I captured this pawn, and she went king to f4. And of course, she was trying to go king to g3 and checkmate me. But I didn't allow this. I played bishop to d6 check, forcing the king away from the g3 square. So she went to e3, and I just pushed my pawn. She pushed her pawn, and I pushed my pawn, and I don't know why, but she captured this. Probably she didn't realize that I just pinned the bishop. So many pinned bishops in this game, yeah. So she captured here the b pawn, I captured this bishop, and after king to d3 and bishop to b4, hugging everybody, she just resigned in this position. So I won this game. I embarrassed myself for not capturing a free rook for 3 moves, but anyways, I was very happy that my first game ended up in a win. Okay, let's have a look at the second game. So in my second game, I was paired against this perhaps 10 years old kid. But I was told beforehand that he's one of the strongest players in the room. He was rated around 1800. So I was really curious what is going to happen on the chessboard. Am I going to get crushed or what? He opened up with pawn to e4 and I went d5 for the Scandinavian. He captured and I played my beloved modern Scandinavian with knight to f6. He played the best move here, pawn to d4, and I went for the Portuguese gambit with bishop to g4. And he played knight to f3, and this is known as the Portuguese gambit classical variation. And I was really happy when I saw this move because I love to play against this opening by white. And I like to use my own system, which I covered in my recent video. So feel free to check it out. I went ahead and captured the knight immediately. He recaptured with his queen, and I captured on d5, offering a very early queen exchange. Now already here he started to think for maybe about 5 minutes. So I knew he's out of his book. And then after 5 minutes of thinking, he played bishop to e2. And all I knew was that this wasn't the best move, but of course nothing wrong with white's position. I was out of the book as well here, but I was aware of some development plan for black pieces, and I knew the knight goes to c6, of course. And in this position, without hesitation, he captured the queen. I recaptured with the knight, and since the d4 pawn is hanging, he played the solid pawn to c3. I went for pawn to e5, trying to open things up in the center. And here he played this quite a rare move, but it makes sense. He played bishop to b5. So now he's spinning my knight. Otherwise, I was threatening to just win the pawn on d4. But now he stops this. But I still just captured on d4 once. And I think a better continuation for him here would be to just go ahead and capture the knight. I know he would have to give up the bishop pair as well, but I would end up with a damaged pawn structure. But he didn't do this. He just captured on d4. And now I played this nice move, knight to b4. I was happy later to find out that this was the best move, but I felt like now I'm in the control seat. Because with this move, I'm now threatening to fork him from c2 square. And also, in the event of him capturing the knight on c6, I have an option to recapture with this other knight. So I don't need to ruin my pawn structure. And I could see that he is now not very happy about the position. Again, he started to think for about 5 minutes. And then he played knight to a3. Of course, he needs to defend the c2 square somehow. Here I got long castled, putting more pressure on the d4 pawn. And he tried to protect it with the bishop, but of course the pawn is already lost. And since my knight is no longer pinned, I was very happy to just go ahead and capture the pawn on d4 with the c knight. So he captured the knight, I captured with the rook, and here he got castled. And after he got castled, I started to take my longer think of what to do, and in the end I opted for the move pawn to a6. There is this chess rule that if your opponent's piece is in your territory, you might want to get rid of it as soon as possible. So that's why I played pawn to a6, and my opponent here was thinking for perhaps 10 minutes. I was quite surprised with the amount of time investment on his part here, because there are just a few options, like he can go bishop to e8, which looks really suspicious. Then he could go to a4, and he can go to e2, and there are just no other options. I was calculating if he would go to a4, I was going to grab this pawn, and now there is this card attack on his bishop. Yeah, but he went to e2, and here I played a rook to d2, and I was really happy about my position. I thought I have a very active rook on the second rank. Life is very good. Even though I noticed that he can deliver this check, of course that is what he played, but I just slide my king over, and I thought I'm doing great here. But then he played rook to d1, and I wasn't very happy when I saw this move, because I didn't want to exchange the rooks. I thought my rook is very nice on the second rank, so I was thinking what to do. And then I took the greedy route, and I just captured another pawn on b2. So now I was up 2 pawns, even though I allowed him to infiltrate on my back rank. With this check, I had to move the king to a7. And I thought, yes, this is annoying, but nothing that I cannot deal with. I thought that I will just fianchetto my dark square bishop, and I'll be able to exchange the rook, and life will be great. So here he played knight to c4, hitting my rook. And yeah, I thought that he would play this, and I knew that, well, I'm just simply going to win another pawn, and I will be up 3 pawns, and this will be like super, super nice for black. But after he played this move, he went out of the room. And I was sitting there thinking what to do. Do I capture the a pawn? And then I realized I have these tactics. I am going to capture the f pawn. And he cannot capture the rook, because then bishop goes to c5 with check, and I'll be grabbing his other rook. So I thought this is going to just finish him off. And unfortunately, this didn't work. And after he returned to the chair and he looked at the position, he came up with a refutation. Feel free to pause the video and try to figure out a refutation of this tactic that I went for, and see for yourself if you are as strong as a 10-year-old 1800 chess player. So the move that he played, I didn't realize was possible. He just captured my bishop on f8, and now there is no piece to deliver this check from c5. And now both of my rooks are hanging. What am I going to do? I was so desperate here. I didn't know, I didn't realize I was set. I thought I threw the game. So after thinking for a while, I came up with this desperado. I captured on g2, so he captured this rook and I captured his rook. And the resulting position is I am down a bishop, but I have 4 pawns for it. So I knew this isn't the end of the world and I still have my chances, but I wasn't sure if this is going to be enough. Here my opponent continued with pawn to a3, harassing my knight. I went knight to d5, and he continued to harass the knight with his bishop as well. So I just covered the knight with my rook, and he played the rook to b1. Finding all the active squares for his pieces, I was feeling like I'm in trouble here. I knew I have to close the b file, so I pushed pawn to b5, harassing his knight, but he has this nice square for his knight, e5, and now he's not only threatening to win this pawn, he's also threatening to fork me here. So I knew at minimum I'm losing a pawn here. So that didn't make me feel much better, but I went king to b6 to stop the forking, and he captured the pawn. Now he's also hitting my rook, and I was trying to figure out some active play for my pieces, and I came up with knight to e3 check. He went king to f2, and I went rook to d3. So I thought this was nice because I'm protecting the knight, but I also am trying to win this a-pawn. And I knew if I win the a-pawn, then I'll be having some strong chances to win and just to get my pawns rolling and promote to a queen. So here he protected the pawn by pushing it to a4. Of course I cannot capture because my b-pawn is pinned. And I played knight to c4. He went bishop to e2, just hitting everybody on this light square diagonal. And I played a rook to d4. So protecting my knight, as it has to be protected, otherwise he can capture and the pawn is pinned, as I explained. But perhaps also I'm now threatening to fork him from the f4 square. So he played the knight to g5. Perhaps he is trying to win the h-pawn, or perhaps he just wanted to avoid the forking. But I knew the h-pawn isn't important, and even if he can grab it for free, I knew that his knight would be kind of out of the action, far away, so I didn't mind losing the h-pawn. And here I came up with a nice move, knight to a3, hitting the rook and preparing to capture that pawn on a4. And here he surprised me with his next move, and he just pushed the pawn to a5 with a check. And at first I was like, am I getting into some trouble? Is he going to pin my knight? What is happening? Well, I would just push the pawn and protect the knight here. Turns out that this pawn to a5 check is one of the top engine lines, and I just don't really understand why, because there is nothing else, it just hangs the pawn. And after I took it, he went a rook to c1, so hitting my c-pawn. I just went back with my king, and then he went knight to e6, forking the rook and the pawn. So I had to go to d7 to protect everything. And he was just horsing around for a while. He went knight to f4, and I thought, yeah, this is the time for my pawns to be pushed. So I pushed this c-pawn, and I started to feel very, very good here. Because now who is going to be stopping the pawn? I knew at some point he would have to like sacrifice a piece for a pawn, and I would be winning there. Okay, so he went knight to d3, threatening the pawn on c5. So I just played a very, very solid rook to c7, just supporting the pawn from the back. And the last sane thought in my head was, if he plays knight back to f4, I need to be cautious of this fork. And I knew that this thought crossed my mind. And this is what he played. He played a knight to f4, but he immediately offered a draw to me. And I knew, I got you. You are offering a draw to me. You know you are dead lost in this position. And I just started to think which pawn to push first. Do I push c pawn? Do I push b pawn? Which pawn to push to victory? And I absolutely forgot about the fork. Also, the sun just started to shine bright on the chessboard, and I have some eye conditions and I'm very light sensitive, and I just didn't see well. I pushed the c pawn. What a terrible blunder. It is even worse if I tell you the clock situation was I had more than 40 minutes or perhaps around 40 minutes. He had 13 minutes or so, and I just blundered this. Well, what a shame. I was embarrassed when he delivered the fork and I lost my rook. And I was still thinking maybe there is a chance that I will push some of the pawns to victory, but I did not. He attacked my knight. I protected the knight. The knight was protecting the c pawn. Okay, he went bishop to d1. I marched my king forward. He also got closer with his king. And then he slid the bishop in my territory. And then there was another brain failure on my part because I have noticed that I could fork him, but the bishop is protecting the forking square, and I just blitzed out the move. Pawn to b3, trying to go for the fork, blocking his bishop, and I just hanged the knight. And a couple of moves later, I just resigned. He played bishop to c2 to stop the queening. I attacked his rook, he captured here. I tried to, do something, but nothing was good enough, and it was in this position that I resigned. And yeah, even though I was punching myself in my face for this loss because I knew I could have won this game, I still think that this was a great experience for me, and I am really looking for the next round, which will be on the 16th of November, and I'm going for 2 wins there. I promise you, I will bring a very nice recap from there, possibly some Gandalf gambit, possibly some other crazy gambit in the next rounds, hopefully. Anyways, thanks guys for watching. Thanks for not laughing at me in the comments. Let me know what you think about this recap and if you would like to see other recaps as well. And yeah, take care, stay safe, have fun, and bye.